Allora, vorrei cominciare con una domanda. Do you want to wear allora, proviamo a vedere se funziona. Una domanda per Jennifer, alla quale però vorrei rispondesse anche Michael. Questo non è un concert movie, è un viaggio musicale concepito in maniera molto originale, molto diversa da quella a cui noi siamo abituati. Quali sono state le fasi del processo creativo? Quando è arrivata l'idea di introdurre il personaggio del predicatore? Ecco, come è stato concepito?
The film originally was conceived when Bob Dylan's team first found this material that we all had thought was lost. And that many people didn't even know it existed, just really one person did. And we saw a performing of one song, Pressing On. We moved away from using any of the material where Bob was speaking to the audience, because the whole impetus for the film was really to have everybody experience and fall in love with this music that was originally passed off of and not really thought about as good. And then you watch these performances come to life. And if we had let any of the speaking and sermons part that people refer to of Dylan in concert, I just knew that it would take away everything else, because everyone really obsesses over every word that he says because he is such a craftsman. And we did want to add a contextual context that could really seem classic almost from any time with these themes. So we approached Luc Sant, who wrote these beautiful sermons, and we had very specific, intense, well, specific is the wrong word. We had a very, we knew we needed it to be an actor who was really incredible and intense, that also had a subtlety of being able to portray both comedy and empathy in very unique ways. And the first person on our list was this gentleman next to me.
And are you a fan of Bob Dylan? And
oh yeah, I've always been a huge fan of Bob Dylan. I told Jennifer the first concert I ever went to when I was a little boy was Bob Dylan. I saw Bob Dylan at the Kentucky State Fair. I'm from the state of Kentucky originally, and my mom took me to see him. And from that point on, I knew this was a very special man, and my admiration for him just kept growing over the years. And he's been a big inspiration to me as an actor. Oftentimes, particularly if I'm doing theater, I like to listen to music before I go on stage, and oftentimes I turn to his music for inspiration for my performances. So, yeah, I was a big fan.
c'è una domanda lì?
Hi, the sermons were really beautiful in this film, especially one in particular talking about rich men who put on a good front and steal from the poor. Michael, was there anyone in particular you were thinking of during that performance?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Unfortunately, I wish there was just one person that I could think of while I was doing that sermon, but it seems to be kind of an archetype, really, at this point. There's so many different people it could be. I recently, a few films before this one, had the privilege of playing George Westinghouse in a movie called The Current War. That's in a bit of a holding pattern right now because of who produced it, but nevertheless, we made it, and it was a great honor to play George Westinghouse because he was a man who somehow managed to amass great wealth and build an empire without screwing people over. He was actually a very decent human being and very kind to his workers, but he seems to be the odd man out, even back then, and we're talking a while ago, you know. Yeah, that's all right. He was surrounded by industrialists and bankers that just wanted to not treat people fairly, and that always really upset him. So anyway, I think there's a lot of people that you could unfortunately be thinking of when you're doing that sermon.
One of the things that's also interesting about the film that Michael points out very well, that it became an archetype, is again not placing a specific reference too much into it. But at the time when Dylan was going through this period, it was the end of Jimmy Carter's presidency in the States, when we got a very rich actor named Ronald Reagan coming in, and a new Republican thought into the overall social political culture of the States, and everything was changing then as well. That's one of the reasons why we felt that an overall classic context of whenever this could happen has always been going on, had it been in the 1800s, the 1900s, or now.
Buongiorno, lei in questo documentario sostanzialmente dà vita ad uno dei periodi artistici più discussi di Bob Dylan, quindi è come se interpretasse in qualche modo un'anima artistica di Bob Dylan. Recentemente ha interpretato Elvis. Cosa hanno in comune secondo lei questi due icone del rock? E poi volevo chiedere a entrambi se comunque Bob Dylan ha visto il film. Grazie.
I don't have confirmation or direct feedback that Bob has seen the film, but we hear that he's happy.
Yeah, that's when I first met to do this film. I met Jennifer, and I also met Dylan's manager, Jeff. And one of the things Jeff said in the meeting is that Dylan is relentlessly focused on the present. A lot of people pay lip service to that, but Dylan really means it. He's not interested or intrigued by his own past very much. I think we all are, a lot more than he is, which is one of the reasons he's continues to be such a great artist, is that he doesn't get mired in his own legend, you know. In terms of there being a similarity between Dylan and Elvis, one of the things that struck me playing Elvis in that film, when I was doing my research and also talking to Elvis's friend Jerry Schilling, is that Elvis was a deeply spiritual person and always on a quest, not just for success or to be a star, but a deeper understanding of why this was happening to him and what he could do with it, what he could give to people beyond just entertainment, and constantly trying to improve himself. And I think that's something that he shares in common with Dylan, is that deep spiritual questioning, restlessness, a relentless pursuit of some sort of deeper significance in the work.
Prego. Parli.
Bene. Allora, catenavo solo per... L'ingegnere però, ecco sì, adesso si sente perfetto. All'inizio del film c'è un intervistato, però,
No, aspetti, perché altrimenti devi tradurre.
se no non c'è la traduzione.
Niente. Possiamo cambiarlo il microfono? Intanto prendi via. Cerchiamo di risolvere.
Sì, ecco, sì, adesso si sente che eravamo solo per l'ingegnere. Dicevo, all'inizio del film c'è un intervistato che veniva a uno di questi concerti, il quale dice: io non sono molto interessato in effetti all'aspetto religioso, io sono molto più interessato al sound. E allora volevo capire se come scelta registica, per esempio quello di non mettere i sottotitoli dei testi delle canzoni, che qualche volta si fa perché se sono particolarmente significativi magari poteva dare un maggior messaggio, è proprio quello di farci concentrare più sul sound che non sui testi, e magari però c'è probabilmente un rapporto tra i testi e poi i sermoni, quindi se ci dice qualcosa anche sui testi, grazie.
Yes, and I do understand that there might be frustration in that we don't have subtitles on the songs themselves. That comes from a much larger decision that they have never done subtitles for Mr. Dylan's songs, so it became a larger deal in the different languages that we were looking at. Again, the fact that the Nobel Prize happened last year, I think, is a little bit of understanding the complexity of taking a writer's work and then dealing with getting translations on all. He is very intense on these 3 albums in general, where all the songs come from, and it's very much. It's very religious. It's very. I'm trying to think of the best. It's a difficult question to represent Bob's lyrics and their spirituality and the religious context. But he is coming from the lyrics themselves. When looking at them, one can take away that they're coming from a place of deep depth in the belief, and that if you gotta believe, and you gotta get on board with this, otherwise you're going to be lost, because this is where the future, this is how you're going to have a future. And he very much believed in that philosophy. But I don't think Mr. Dylan is ever someone who does anything halfway, and spirituality in general and religion, I think, to me, is always something in terms of his general philosophy that even outside of these 3 albums you can find in all of his work.
Question for Michael Shannon. I very much enjoy all of your work, even though a lot of movies I don't really appreciate as a whole, but your performance is always something else and brings forth some dimension to the movie, which gets it watchable. You said that Bob Dylan as an actor, do you also enjoy him as a director, Ronaldo and Clara? Did you watch it?
I've never seen Ronaldo and Clara. I saw Masked and Anonymous when that came out. I think that's the only time I've ever seen any of the film work. But no, I haven't seen Ronaldo and Clara. It's interesting. I've been reading a lot about it lately because I was working on a Sam Shepard play in the States, and I was reading Sam Shepard's biography, and there's a lot in there about Shepard trying to write the screenplay of Ronaldo and Clara with Dylan and having a lot of frustrating experiences. Yeah, I don't know if that stuff moves me necessarily in the same way as the music. I feel like the music is really where he found his calling, you know. Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to see it. I've just never had the opportunity. If I did see it, I'd like to see it on a big screen, which is how I like to see movies, and they don't play it very often. So.
Domande? Io vorrei riallacciarmi a una domanda precedente per chiedere, cioè per dire che osservando Dylan cantare in quel concerto, non so, mi sembrava che fosse particolarmente gioioso, particolarmente pieno di energia, molto emozionato anche. Ecco, mi chiedevo se era una mia impressione, io sinceramente non ho visto molti concerti di Bob Dylan, o se effettivamente era quel periodo che gli trasmetteva tutta quella emozione.
I think personally that he did definitely feel more open and joyous and allowed himself to also revel within that, within this also incredible band that he had, that there was an overall sense of joy and movement, I think. You see Dylan move in a way on stage that, from watching him from footage forever and having done other projects, that I have never seen before. And I think that you also see between the pictures and the footage, his face is also almost looks more open than more internalized, as he does in most of his other performances. I agree.
You noticed the same?
Yeah, it was interesting. My manager came with me to the screening we had in New York City, and my manager is not a huge Bob Dylan fan, but he was very struck by the performance in the film. And he said that what that guy's doing is really happening to him. It's very authentic. He's not putting on a show, per se. He's having an experience, and it's the stakes are very high. You can tell that the stakes are very high, but he seems to, at the same time, find peace. It's amazing how he finds peace in the middle of a situation that a lot of artists would be very scared of, a situation where his fans, not all of them, but a large percentage of them, seem to be turning on him or turning away from him. But he has the courage to pursue this message despite that. I think it's very admirable. Yes.
Mentre arriva il microfono ne faccio una velocissima, while we are waiting for the mic. C'è anche una bellissima scena alla fine, quella al pianoforte, così come c'è un altro momento invece delle prove in studio. Anche quelli sono momenti molto particolari, molto preziosi, perché insomma raramente vediamo quei momenti lì, soprattutto riguardo a Bob Dylan. Anche quelli sono stati trovati insieme alle immagini del concerto o sono una cosa diversa?
No, they were found at the same time when we found the boxes of the concert. The rehearsals were done, these particular rehearsals were done in between the second and third legs of the gospel tour. And the woman who he sings with is one of his backup singers, Clyde King. And yeah, it was one of those things that you saw, and I couldn't wait for everybody to see it, because it's just so incredible. And it's also great to see him. You see him play piano in the show, and he plays piano now, but seeing him in that environment, playing just so intimately and simply, I also think is amazing.
Buongiorno, Francesca Carleoni dell'Ansa, e il predicatore che lei incarna un senso etico molto forte ed è un senso etico che lei in qualche modo trasmette anche nelle sue scelte come attore, nei personaggi che sceglie, nei film che sceglie, nei registi con cui sceglie di lavorare. Volevo chiederle, in questo momento in cui questo predicatore ad esempio addita gli ipocriti, chi si nasconde dietro le maschere, volevo chiederle in questo momento in cui il mondo di Hollywood stanno cadendo diverse maschere, lei come lo sta vivendo? Grazie.
Well, that's a complex question. Sometimes what I do for a living seems very silly, and this would be one of those times. With all that's going on in the world, I have children and I worry about the future, and I'm not really sure how these movies I'm making are going to help them. But at the same time, I've had the pleasure of being able to at least work on films that have a very strong message. I think that can inspire people to consider certain things that we're dealing with right now. This film, or like I mentioned, the current war that I worked on, I'm trying to find things that I think will plant a seed in the consciousness of people. Not that most people aren't aware of what the problems are, but that maybe ultimately might offer some sort of solace, or like I said earlier, peace. I feel like one of the great things art can do is provide people with peace, which is desperately in need of, the world is desperately in need of right now. So that's what I'm trying to focus on.
If I can comment on that. I just thought it was interesting. I recently rewatched Revolutionary Road, and one of the things that I thought was interesting was how your character comes in and simply states the thing that's obvious to him and why isn't it obvious to everybody else, and how life should be led. And I actually was like, oh, that sounds familiar. There are interesting correlations there in all the work that you did.
Tell the truth, yeah.
C'è una domanda lì? Di su in alto?
Sì, buongiorno. Una domanda e un piccolo chiarimento. Il piccolo chiarimento era se la redazione dei testi dei sermoni interpretati dal signor Shannon erano più intesi come un accompagnamento o un approfondimento di quello che sono i testi di Dylan. La domanda invece riguarda il rapporto eventuale con il racconto di quella fase della vita e della carriera di Dylan fatto in Io non sono qui di Todd Haynes, se per caso avete preso qualche spunto da quello che era stato fatto attraverso il personaggio di Christian Bale in quel film. Grazie.
Interesting question. You know, there have been a couple of references how they're, obviously other than Dylan, people have brought up I'm Not Here. First, I would never say that anything that could be written could necessarily go deeper than anything that Bob Dylan could write in a few stanzas. Nothing against Luke Stott, I think he's a genius as well. But Luke knew the period we were going to write about, and he knew the music. So there were specific topics that we spoke to with the Dylan team about, that also included Dylan about what these topics should be and what the sermons, which he really wanted to be real sermons, were to be about. And Luke did a lot of research himself, and listening and reading sermons from the 20s and 30s. all the way through the 60s, I believe, and in the South a lot as well, to make sure that they would feel authentic and like real sermons and not, Hollywood versions thereof.
But I think, I think I think it's very much like church itself. When you go to church, there usually tend to be, in my limited experience, two different things happening. There's a celebration of God, which usually involves song, and then the preacher comes and says, "Okay, folks, we've had our celebration. Now let's think about something important and think about what we're supposed to do." And so, in that regard, it almost feels like going to church in a way.
Dobbiamo fermarci qui. We have to stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.